Now these cops didn't have nothing better to do other than go and mess with this like kid or whatever whatnot, you know what I mean? Anyway, this kid was only minding his business, walking outside, whether it's like, sizzle or whatever whatnot. You know what I'm saying? He was on the rest. And there's these cops just like ran up to him and slammed him down on the ground or whatever whatnot. Like on the rest. And he slammed him hard on the rest or whatever whatnot. Why? Because the boy was whining, and yes, he was frowning or whatever whatnot because he felt the pain or whatever whatnot. You know what I mean? After that, they messed with him again or whatever. He was just walking minding his business or whatever whatnot. He had his phone in his hand or whatever whatnot. You know what I'm saying? He looked at the cop, and the cop decided to mess with him again because he was up there just actually just looking at him or whatever whatnot. You know what I mean? Real though. And he they just put handcuffs on him and all that. It was crazy as ever, you know what I'm saying? Real though. Especially when this dude didn't do nothing wrong or nothing like that. I'm saying, up there trying to say he committed a crime or whatever whatnot, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, he didn't commit no crime at all. And that's on, bro. Anyway, now, the police was out of pocket because they let this man die from dehydration and been in custody or whatever whatnot. The police cut the water off for no reason. They cut the water off for no reason and let this man just die from thirst or whatever whatnot. And it was crazy as ever. I mean this dude was thirsty as ever, but they didn't want to give him none to drink or whatsoever. And then they made fun of him. They taunted him for not having a drink of water or nothing like that. And then this dude died from dehydration up in his cell or whatever whatnot. That's some crazy stuff. And that's on real. I don't know. Anyway. So now these cops end up messing with this woman for no reason, because this cop went up to this woman's ride or whatever, and he said her stuff was inspired or whatever whatnot. Her stuff wasn't inspired. He didn't even go up to her and ask her about her ID or nothing like that. He just went up there and then started running until bust out a window or whatever whatnot. He told her to get up out the car or whatever whatnot, and she wouldn't even comply or nothing like that. For real, she was on the phone. And he just opened up her door without her consent. And then he was just saying, step out the car, step out the car. You know what I'm saying? Now, she closed her door and locked the door or whatever. He went to go get his baton or whatever whatnot, you know what I'm saying? And started hitting the door or whatever whatnot. He hit the window, bust the window open and stuff like that. Other cop came and pulled the rest of the window out or whatever whatnot. You know what I'm saying? He forced her opened the door, forced her out of the car or whatever, put her down onto the ground or whatever whatnot, you know what I'm saying? That was crazy as ever, gang. I'm telling you. I mean so, but then her husband came and got the cool or whatever whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Real. And then they tried to up there this place 3 charges on her or whatever whatnot. That stuff was dismissed. And they gave her $15,000. For real though. For the trouble that the police caused or whatever whatnot. For real though. And the dude actually resigned because he didn't want to go through the lawsuit or whatever whatnot. And that's on bro. Anyway. Now I'm telling you, this one dude up there was pretending to be an officer, and he detained someone or whatever. He was up there saying he was like firefighter, and then first he said he was like, a border agent or something like that, and then he said he was a firefighter or whatever went up. And like this dude, like, just actually went out and messed with this like element or whatever went on. And that's him up there gonna make up a story and stuff saying he like, he was saying this and saying that, like posting threats and stuff like that. Dude wasn't even posting no threat or nothing like that. For real though. Anyway, he put this guy in handcuffs or whatever went up. Sat him down on the curb or whatever. And he like, just actually like was talking to him or whatever whatnot. You know what I mean? For real though. Anyway, so every day he like, let the girl go or whatever whatnot, saying? Like, actual police, like, talk to like, the dude who was like impersonating the officer. For real though. And they was in that like, parking lot of CVS or whatever whatnot. And he left up there like, and was explaining about like, what he was doing and like, what I'm saying? What he was like, actually was or whatever whatnot, what I'm saying? And like he was like, that was like, this dude went to jail or whatever whatnot, for real though. So this dude like, actually like, was up there and try to explain, try to like, talk his way out of it or whatever whatnot, but he couldn't even do that. You know what I'm saying? Because like, yeah, he was like, actually just breaking the law. You know what I'm saying? Up there just like, try to like impersonate a cop or whatever whatnot. He had the vest, he had like, some like, badges and stuff like that, but he wasn't an officer. He wasn't an officer at all. He was a sort of vigilante. That's about it. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, yeah, they like, actually like, arrested him for like, impersonating an officer and all this other stuff, you know what I'm saying? But that was crazy as ever. They like, actually like he didn't serve no jail time or nothing like that. They just put him on probation. And that's on, bro. That's some crazy stuff. That dude was lucky as ever. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so they these like officers like up in Mississippi start messing with this dude because like this dude was up in his car and he was sitting in his car by the hotel or whatever when I around him. This dude like, actually like, woke up and like, came out of this hotel room. You know what I'm saying? Decided to wait in his car because he wanted the car to warm up or whatever because it was cold outside. Whatsoever, whatnot, you know what I'm saying? And that's thing, the police like start messing with him or whatever, whatnot, you know what I'm saying? Just messing with him, just obviously messing with him up there, acting like he had like, narcotics up in the car or whatever, whatnot, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like they just wanted to make stuff up or whatever, whatnot, you know what I'm saying? So they could like, get into like, that like, aggression mode, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, so that's what happened, gang. Anyway, so he was like, the officer was asking him, like, about his license and stuff like that. And he, like, talking about his ID and all that stuff. He, like, no, he ain't gonna show him his ID. He already knew his first name. Whatever, whatnot. You know what I'm saying? For real. Anyway, so he just, like, they made him late work. He probably lost his job for that stuff. Or whatever, whatnot, because his officers, like, what I'm saying, just instantly, like, was on a packing for that stuff, or whatever, whatnot, you know what I mean? Anyway, so, him and the officer going back and forth, having an argument over again, about the same old thing, same old, and he out there, like, trying to say he was, like, doing, like, meth or coke or something like that. He like, I can see that powder on your nose, the powder on your pants, the powder was on your dance floor, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was crazy as ever. He was like, that's some oil. He was like, ain't no oil, it's no white powder. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's crazy. You know what I'm saying? They bust his window. You know what I'm saying? Forced him down on the ground right after they got him out the car or whatever, whatnot. It was crazy as ever. And, like, they had to, like, let him go because, like, why? I mean, like, the charges was already dropped. but they didn't let him go. They already locked him up or whatever and whatnot. But the charges, just like I said, it was dropped. He took him to court, and the court sided with all three of the police that did that to that man or whatever. Because why? They had some crazy laws in Mississippi, and that's on bro. Anyway, so this one dude actually had a seizure up in his house or whatever whatnot. And this woman was trying to his fiance was actually trying to make him come down or whatever whatnot, but he couldn't even come down, he couldn't even control his body or nothing like that. He was going through a seizure, he blacked out and all that stuff. He didn't even know what was going on. Next thing you know, she called 911. She tried to get the paramedics over there or whatever, so they could see what's wrong with him or whatever whatnot. But he just had a seizure or whatever whatnot, and he up there panicking and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Plus he blacked out, so the police showed up or whatever whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And start messing with this dude or whatever, try to get him to calm down and stuff, but he can't even control himself. Why? Because he was already blacked out or whatever. You know what I'm saying? He was moving, try to, actually, get the police off him or whatever. You know what I'm saying? The cop just, was out of pocket, slammed him down put him down on the bed or whatever. And he tased him. He tased him, 2 times or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And then actually put him on his stomach, you know what I'm saying, put some handcuffs on him, you know what I'm saying. It was crazy as ever. For real, gang. I'm dang, that's some messed up stuff. And then when they got him to the hospital or whatever, when I in this hospital bed, one of the cops said he was under arrest for you know what I'm saying, resisting arrest and battery on the officer. And that was crazy as ever, okay? Real though. And they wanted to let him go, but the other officer that said he was on arrest, they wanted him to go to the county or whatever on that. Real though. And that was crazy as ever. And he tried to sue them or whatever, and they dropped that case. Because that's crazy as ever. That's some crazy stuff. For real though, I don't know why they dropped the case. For real though, he had a case on him and they dropped it because they didn't want to pay no money. And that's on bro. But anyway, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Hit the bell on notifications so you see my next upload and my next post, and make sure I make it up once tomorrow. And oh yeah, you can check out my previous videos if you like it. So long, farewell, goodbye.